and a warm welcome. You're joining us once again at Hyde Park on Ada Derana 24 as Sri Lanka continues to tread on an IMF negotiated deal, as well as seeking debt reassurances and working on a policy plan towards ensuring that the economy moves slowly but steadily out of crisis. We're talking about what policy measures need to be adopted, whether an IMF deal is what the Sri Lankan economy needs, what are the repercussions of an IMF deal, and working with other neighboring countries, superpowers, to ensure that Sri Lanka comes out of this crisis. I've invited to our studios two eminent economists. Let me warmly welcome, joining us here in studio, Dr. Tissa Jayaweera, economist, a former Vice President of the SARC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, a member of the Federation of Chambers of Commerce and Industry of Sri Lanka, and has held multiple positions as Chairman and MD in corporates. A warm welcome to you, Dr. Jayaweera. Aiboan to you. And joining us virtually, we have with us Dr. Nadeem Ul Haque, former IMF resident coordinator for Sri Lanka, as well as Nadeem Ul Haque. Dr. Ul Haque is currently the Vice Chancellor of Pakistan Institute of Development Economics, and he also served as the Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission of Pakistan. Dr. Ul Haque, thank you very much for joining us virtually from Pakistan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to start off the conversation with an open question to both gentlemen. We have started working on an IMF plan, as well as working with other countries who Sri Lanka has to work on debt to restructure these outstanding debt. Are we on the right track? Has Sri Lanka taken the measures needed to address the concerns that the IMF has put forth and the other countries to whom Sri Lanka owes debt? Dr. Jayaweera.
Okay. As it is, we are in a bad wicket, but this country has never been this bad in the past, but we need a bailout package from wherever it is available to get out of the current crisis. Now, if you take the history of this country, people are talking of the 75 years of independence, and then from where we were and what we are now. This, what I see in this country is, we don't have a plan for immediate action. We don't have a plan for next week. We don't have a plan for next month. We don't have a plan for next year, and a plan for the next 5 years. Usually in corporate management, we make plans for 5 years, what is called a corporate plan. This country has never had a corporate plan from any leader other than, I don't want to get involved in politics, but the current leader is focused on making a plan. He has made a plan for the next 25 years. I hope people in this country, they will take that plan forward, because when politicians get appointed in this country, they don't have a plan. They only talk. They are only, what we say, empty vessels that make the biggest noise. Currently you see that heavily happening in when you watch the media, empty vessels, but has anybody come up with a concrete plan to take this country forward? Nobody yet, other than what has been stated by the current president.
Right. I'd like to turn to Dr. Nadeem Ul Haque, a renowned Pakistani economist, policy expert, and you were the resident representative here in Sri Lanka of the International Monetary Fund. You know how the IMF works. Tell us whether we are on track and whether we have addressed the policy challenges that the IMF has pointed to.
Look, I sit in a country, Pakistan, which is similar to Sri Lanka. You've had 19 fund programs over the last 75 years. We've had 23 fund programs. The fund program lasts, the effects of it, including the program, lasts roughly about 4 or 5 years. So if you can think about it, we've virtually been in a fund program all our lives. both Sri Lanka and Pakistan. So I think, quite frankly, this chain has to be broken. This addiction has to be broken. We must get out of fund program. I know little about Sri Lanka, but I picked up the fund report and I was reading it just now because I've been away from Sri Lanka a long time. And the issues remain pretty much the same as they were when I was there 20 years ago. You're still struggling with a very large fiscal deficit. You're still struggling with a very large debt position. Your debt position is almost 100, 110, 120% of GDP, which is very large. Your fiscal deficit about 9% of GDP. Your fiscal situation is this, that you pay most of your deficit is spent on salaries and subsidies. It's this situation, this is similar to Pakistan. Pakistan is the similar situation. I think Mr. Jayaweera, Dr. Jayaweera is right. There needs to be policy seriousness and serious policy planning and thought. And I find that in my country, Pakistan, this doesn't happen. And I suspect Sri Lanka is also kind of muddling along. We have done enough muddling along in Pakistan. Sri Lanka, as I was reading, issues remain the same. Sri Lankan government still fixes the number of prices. In Pakistan also they fix a number of prices. Subsidies still go to agriculture and various sectors. Same here in Pakistan. I think this is a colonial legacy that we continue to maintain. We have to get over this. We have to have a modern state, a modern place. Year 2023, we must be thinking modern tunes. We must be thinking high tech. We must be making a government high tech. We must be making a system high tech. We must be ready to export. We must be ready to compete in the world. Sri Lanka had an excellent tourism industry. But once again, you got mired by the fact that you went into many political issues. But if you can get that act together, use what you have in terms of resources, develop your tourist industry. When I used to be there, I used to talk about it all the time, that Sri Lanka was supposed to be the Dubai of South Asia. And you missed that boat. So Dubai became the Dubai of South Asia, or Dubai became the Sri Lanka of South Asia. I mean, South Asia, we were bickering, India and Pakistan. Sri Lanka should have been the duty-free and, etc. And it used to be when I was growing up. But now Dubai has taken the mantle. Why? Because people go to Dubai for a holiday in the desert. Why don't they come to Sri Lanka? I think that needs to be examined. Finally, on the question of the IMF, I don't think there is an escape. The world's gatekeeper of finance is the IMF, so you have to go to the IMF. Whether the IMF program will lift you out of your problems, no, it won't. IMF program is a band-aid. They will get you some debt restructuring, they'll get you some flows, and they'll ask you to slow down your economy, and you'll have to do all that. But where do you get your productivity and growth from? That's up to you. That depends on how much you're willing to undertake reform. For example, I remember when I was in Sri Lanka, I tried very hard and we got this, that people can buy real estate in Sri Lanka. I think you stopped that. Why can't foreigners come and buy real estate? Even Dubai allows buying real estate, but you won't. So I mean, these little things like that, subsidizing agriculture, fixing agricultural prices, these things now sound bizarre. 75 years ago, they were required because we were coming out of a war and the British administration put them in. But Pakistan has not got rid of them. And I think much the same is happening in Sri Lanka. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to add to that question also, Dr. Ul Haque. Now, many studies point to the fact that IMF policies cause recession and depression. And several other economists were also talking about debt forgiveness, that debt forgiveness is the only way forward for Sri Lanka while Sri Lanka works to restructure outstanding debt with the countries as a prerequisite to the IMF program. And we saw many economists also alluding to the fact that an IMF package imposes certain conditions that will put a great burden on the poor, putting them into a lot of suffering and pushing them into a state of, a disparity in the economy. How do you address these concerns?
I think, first thing, debt forgiveness. I mean, think about it. If you had given me a loan, and I wasted the money, and then I came to you and said, hey, forgive my debt, how would you feel? I think, quite frankly, debt forgiveness is a term that we like to use. I know in Pakistan we like to use that too a lot. But the issue is really, why would the world forgive their hard-earned money? I don't think debt forgiveness happened on very few occasions. And there was never really a full debt forgiveness. It's kind of some write-downs, etc. Sure, some of that can happen, but it requires a large global consensus for that to happen. I don't think you should wait around for debt forgiveness. I don't think it's going to happen. There will be a debt restructuring, and yes, you'll get some relief in there. But look, all the lenders have the right to ask the question. I speak as a Pakistani. Are my country suffering from this? All the lenders have the right to ask us. And in fact, I have worked in the fund on the other side, and I kept telling the fund, please ask my country this. That what are you going to do to fix your economy? Or is it that, like an addict, you want debt forgiveness so that you can start, your addiction again? I think, quite frankly, we are addicted to debt, and we ourselves have to get over this hump and say, guys, how do we stop using debt in a poor manner? For example, if we used our debt well, our economies were growing fast, we wouldn't have a debt problem today. We have a debt problem because we wasted the money. So let's go back and look, where did we waste the money? And let's stop that waste. We wasted the money on subsidies. In Pakistan, we wasted the money on subsidies. We wasted the money on building useless infrastructure. We wasted the money on building things that were not necessary. For example, we want to build flyovers for cars. And I keep asking, why do we want to build flyovers for cars? Is that such a necessity? Cars are owned by about 3 or 4% of the people. Why do they need to travel so fast? We want to build, for example, excessive energy plants, even though we don't use energy wisely. We want to build coal-fired energy if we don't have coal, so we have to import coal. So I think there are a number of things that we have to ask ourselves before we start asking the world for debt forgiveness. And even if we ask for some debt restructuring, which might happen, the world is going to ask us, hey guys, is this going to happen again? And we should prepare ourselves for that. I say, as a Pakistani, I say, honestly, it is a question of my honor that I go back with a good plan and say, guys, this will never happen again. We are self-respecting people.
Again, the question about the poor, the kind of pressure that an IMF program will put on the poor and the most vulnerable communities of society.
I was looking at the IMF paper, and they clearly say that they should invest in a social safety net. Of course, you can give the poor some well-targeted subsidies. I think we also, in my country at least, everybody talks about the poor without knowing the poor or understanding the poor. In my country, poverty has dropped dramatically. And yeah, there are very few poor. Yes, of course. And we have got a very big social security program. We can cover them in a very targeted manner. So I don't think that is a problem at all. The problem is, yes, there will be hardships. And instead of the poor, the hardship should fall on the people who have had a party. Quite frankly, I know the people who have had a party in Pakistan. Number of people have had a party. And now, are we going to tell them the party's over? Do we have the guts to tell them the party's over? That's the issue, I think.
Dr. Jayaweera, I'd like to turn to you now. I think Dr. Ul Haque was talking about why these subsidies are not optimally used, why they're not targeted, and how our part of the region suffer as a result of unproductive policies. But here in Sri Lanka, do you think, as we try to come out of this crisis, whether we have still a sustainable framework, a way out of this crisis while addressing these challenges we've seen? We've seen the economy run, the people, communities run on handouts. Every budget we look forward for handouts and these subsidies that are extended by through government policy. Do you think we're putting it right? What more needs to be done?
Well, Dr. Haque, you mentioned two items that are striking a bell in my head. I'll come to those, but to answer your question, Indeewari, now, say, for example, agriculture. There is a shortage of eggs all over the world. 12 eggs in the US it's about now $1 an egg. We are fighting over eggs to sell it at 50 rupees an egg. Why have that control? Let the egg be available at 50 or 60 or 70 so that the grower will benefit, not the middleman. Then the grower will grow and then bring the price down due to competition. Now, if, for example, so one of the largest economies in the world, the USA, they have what is called public liability. In that country, when people or the farmers grow in excess, the government takes the liability and buys the excess product and gives countries like us or Pakistan or most parts of Africa PL, public liability. Long time ago, we got wheat flour on a public liability which was known as PL 480, and during a shortage of rice, we survived on the PL 480, which was flour given to this country. But then if you talk of subsidies, it's happening all over the world, but not to the extent that this country is extending subsidies. Where the government should realize is, let the people grow, not have controls. Give them the required seeds, give them the required fertilizers, not free, but subsidized so that they produce and pay back. If the system applies through the banking system, like I was looking at some news items this morning, most of the handouts given to the farmers, their bank accounts are not right, and it's returned back to the government. So why should this happen? We should have a system. We have 1.4 million public officials in this country. Are they taking their responsibility? What have the whoever that is responsible for handing out this money to the farmers taken the responsibility to see that the money goes to the right people? We always highlight this through the media, saying that it has come back. Why did it come back? It's due to the inefficiency of the government system. So that's where we have to look at. And then taking another clue on what Dr. Ul Haque said about tourism. Say, for example, tourism is one of the programs that can recover the country on a fast track. Are we emphasizing the fact that we have a golden egg in our hand? We are not using it. For example, Vietnam, that got no tourists 20 years ago, got 18 million in 2018. What did they do? Nothing. They had a peaceful country, good advertising, and also encouraging the word of mouth for Vietnam. Now, for example, India, which had only about 4 million tourists going to India in 2018, is now the current Prime Minister of India has realized that India is a world attraction, so large, so many places that you can go to, is encouraging tourism into India. So are we encouraging the tourism into India? It is encouraged only in the media, not actually. Now, say for example, we had a huge turmoil yesterday. Now this is scanned all over the world that we are burning, we are on strike, everything is coming to a standstill. The hospitals are coming to a standstill, the railway is coming to a standstill, every operation in this country is coming to a standstill. Will you go to a country that is in turmoil? There are so many countries that you can go to. Vietnam is improving, India is improving, Cambodia is improving. Those are countries never spoke about tourism. This is a country where a tourist can go from a hot climate to a cold climate within 4 hours. It's not available anywhere in the world. So are we concentrating on that? We are not. The country is not. The people are not concentrating on that. Now that's the best way of improving our foreign exchange and the foreign currency requirement. We are bringing tourists and shouting to say that 1.4 million are coming, but what is their spend for a day? It's about $40 spent for a day. You go to Singapore, you go to Dubai. I mean, it's over $100 spent in the cheapest locations. So we must encourage people to come here that are having pockets full for spending a holiday. So that's where we have to focus on to get the people to encourage them to spend in this country, not have some person taking money from them in those countries and bringing them here and giving a holiday. No, let them travel, let them eat in our various 5-star hotels, 4-star hotels, 3-star hotels, no star places. That is what should be encouraged. I have traveled to many countries in the world and I don't eat rice and curry in those countries. I insist in going to a restaurant, wayside restaurant, and eating their food their way. That's what we have to look at and see. This is a country now, we had toilets for Independence Parade. That has become a big issue. Why? Because sanitation is something that has never been looked at in this country. We had Daragale, no toilets. They went and used the malls in the surrounding area and the hotels in the surrounding area, and they had about 30,000 people using their facilities. Why didn't we think of that? So those are issues that we should not talk of. Even the media is highlighting a toilet. Why? We should be highlighting the values of this country. People. One is people. But the people are not encouraged to highlight themselves, their value of the people. Our people are highly talented. But are we making use of the talent? Today I saw on one of the medias, I have a habit of switching medias, a 17-year-old boy producing a dumbwaiter, that electronically controlled waiter. Now those are being used in Japan, those are being used currently in Singapore because cost of operation, cost of a person is very expensive. But are we supporting that boy in making it commercial? We have had on media many occasions saying that this person invented this, that person invented this. But have we given venture capital? This is a country that doesn't have any venture capital. We had 2 venture capital. They were privatized on the advice of the foreign experts, and we have no venture capital in this country.
Right.
Venture capital has to be taken at commercial rates. Why? There was a time I ran corporates. The banks were investors with us. They gave venture capital. All of them have been paid off, and they got their return more than what they expect by interest by way of dividends. So those are things that our leaders have to look at. No idiot of this management in this country talks of this venture. That's where we require. The banks are going and seizing property that have taken loans during the good period for expansion. Now the period is bad. Now today I had one of my managing directors coming and saying his installments delayed. So I said, don't park your car on the road, always park in a secure place because the car seizure will take your car. It's a brand new, nice shining vehicle. But why should we have that fear? Right. That is the economic recession that we have in this country. Give faith to the people. That's what our leaders are there, especially the opposition. Give faith to the people that we are having a crisis now, but let's all get together and recover from this crisis. Not that we need to come to power and recover. Right? Those fellows, when they come to power, well, this country or all over the world, they are good leaders when they are in the opposition. Give them the opportunity to manage, they can't do it.
On that note, I think it's time we take a short break. We'll return after this break at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24. We're in conversation with 2 eminent economists on Sri Lanka's way out of this crisis. Do stay with us. Welcome back. We are talking about Sri Lanka's path to recovery and prosperity out of this crisis. I'd like to turn to Dr. Nadeem Ul Haque once again about the IMF program and Sri Lanka's expected extended fund facility with the International Monetary Fund. In your expertise, now we've been talking two countries, and sometime in mid-January we heard from China and India, and earlier this month we we heard about Japan, that Sri Lanka has concluded discussions with Japan on debt restructuring, but at the same time international bondholders too had extended support. So in your expertise, how long do you think this process will go? Because we were saying that an IMF bailout package was urgently needed to the economy mid last year as well.
Look, if you get into the IMF program, if you sign the IMF program, if you do what the IMF is saying, then the IMF will take charge of the process and make it happen relatively quickly. The way the world works is that everything works as a part of the IMF program, and the IMF has charted out the course for Sri Lanka for the next 3 to 5 years. Then donors will come in and support that program, that 3 to 5 year policy program, and you will have the debt relief you want. But does that mean you'll be free of another IMF program? Will you go into another IMF program? I don't know. I can tell you in Pakistan, we are going to get we are in the middle of an IMF program. We are going to probably sign the renewal of it in the next few days. But we will probably need another program very shortly afterwards. So in Pakistan, I suspect that we will have another program in the next 6 months to a year. And we'll probably have another program after that, because we are still not ready to take the medicine. Think about it. IMF is an emergency ward. I keep telling people that it's an emergency ward. It can only relieve your pain and give you band-aids and still leave you in some pain. You have to take care of yourself and fix your economy. That's the point. But unfortunately, my country doesn't do that. My country takes the band-aid and then takes the shot of painkillers or whatever, goes high, and then we forget about it. I think the deeper issues are the ones that we really need to debate. Why do we have so many subsidies? Why is the fiscal deficit so large? Why is the government employing so many people? Why are there so many government agencies? Why is the government regulating so much? Why can't foreigners come and invest? Why don't we have an open economy? Why can't we compete with Dubai and Singapore, etc.? Those are the deeper questions that we should ask ourselves.
How do you think, once the IMF funds are dispersed to Sri Lanka, that Sri Lanka should optimally employ these funds for the benefit of recovery? And yes, there's confidence that comes with this bailout package, but at the same time, although it is a small amount that is compared to Sri Lanka's outstanding problems, how do you think Sri Lankan authorities should optimally utilize it?
Look, the IMF money is never utilized. The IMF money stays in reserves, and whatever debt relief you get, you will have some fiscal space. But the key thing, I think, quite frankly, the issue is not money. Issue has never been money. I mean, the reform that we are talking about doesn't take money. Unfortunately, we've used subsidies unwisely, and we got people hooked onto subsidies, and people don't want to give up those subsidies. I think we have to stop that. I think we have to simply say, look, guys, stand on your own 2 feet and work. For example, why can't our industry export? Why can't our agriculture export? Why are they inward looking? Why can't our people innovate? Why can't we do new things? I keep pointing to states that have done it. Vietnam has done it. Why can't we become like Vietnam? So the issue is not money. The issue is imagination. The issue is the ability to reimagine yourself. The issue is the ability to find a new role for yourself. For example, you've got a tourist industry. How can you reimagine your tourist industry? Your hotels are very dated now. How are they going to be refurbished? Do you have new management in there? Is the new management doing anything? Is Sri Lanka becoming a destination? As I keep saying, Dubai is a destination. Has Sri Lanka become a destination? Sri Lanka should have become a destination. What does a destination mean? How do you make it a destination? Okay, but Sri Lanka is an agriculture. What can you export? Should you be growing just simple rice and sugarcane or something, or should maybe Sri Lanka can export some exotic fruits and things? Tea, for example, your tea was great, wonderful, but I think Sri Lanka also had now I don't know what the tea market is like, But in the old days, there was a big debate. Can you use your tea, mix your tea with other teas or not? Can you brand your tea, etc.? So the tea market needed development. As the tea market developed or not? For example, take Starbucks. Starbucks has become $100 billion company. Why can't your tea market become like that? So, I mean, the fundamental questions that people must ask themselves. As I said, one question, why can't people come and buy real estate in Sri Lanka? Why can't people from Pakistan come and buy their holiday homes there? I mean, these are things that we need to, Sri Lanka needs to ask herself, is she a small open economy? Is she an economy that is capable of competing in the world or not? And those are longer term issues that IMF will not answer for you.
But talking about the IMF and policies that will be adopted, and the Sri Lankan authorities must implement as part of the conditions put forth by an IMF agreement. Tax is a big question here in Sri Lanka. Tax rates have increased and in rates that people never envisaged. But at the same time, we remember when the current president took over office, he said that the situation was going to get worse before it gets better. But at the same time, his policy statement just yesterday outlined a policy stance for a longer period. But in terms of tax and the pressure on the common man, on the general public, do you think, especially compared to what's happening in our region and how the policies are adopted, do you think Sri Lanka should be a little more lenient in taxing people and move to corporates, or is this the right policy?
Well, right now, I'm not up to date on Sri Lanka's tax policy as I used to be 20 years ago. But I'll tell you, in Pakistan, for example, our tax policy is a huge problem. We have a very, very strange tax policy where we tax things left, right, and center without thinking. It's almost the kind of policy that medieval kings used to have, that if they saw something, they would tax it. So we've got a very antiquated tax policy. Secondly, we've got a very antiquated tax collection system, where the tax collector himself collects a separate tax over and above the tax that he collects. So this is a bad system. We don't use enough technology in taxes. Online filing is still very difficult. Online collections are very difficult. So I think while right now the IMF, all it can do is, because it's a short-term problem, they will ask you to increase the tax rates. But again, it is up to you, it is up to the Sri Lankans, or it is up to me, the Pakistanis, my friends, and they don't have the capacity to do it. In Pakistan, I can tell you what I would do very simply. We should have very simple taxes. We should have VAT. We should have an income tax and a corporate tax, and it should be very simple, and it should be at a very, very low level, but it should apply to everybody. And at the same time, it should be collected electronically. It should be very simple, very easy to give. But I think the bigger problem lies, even in Sri Lanka, I was looking at the figures, your tax GDP ratio stands at about 11%. But your expenditures are 20%. Now, please tell me, why are Sri Lankan government expenditures 20%? As I said, 4% is subsidies, but then there's a huge government apparatus too. So can you reduce the government apparatus? Should there be less rules, permissions, this, that, etc.? Those things, I think, in Pakistan, we are looking at them very, very carefully. And I'm trying to tell people, tell the government, look, simplify, simplify, simplify. But our bureaucracy does not want to simplify. The man who's collecting bribes doesn't want to simplify. Those are the issues that we have to face, which means that the university should wake up. They should give you good research to be able to do these things. The issues lie deeper. We need good research to make this happen, but then the government must be willing to use good research.
What about state-owned enterprises? Something that we heard was that these state-owned enterprises will be restructured, meaning privatized, but also some of the profit-making entities will also be a part of the privatization program. What is your view on this?
I think, again, this is a question of imagination. We lack the imagination. We think privatization is a very simple, like selling cloth or like selling sugar or burgers. No, I think privatization is a complex process, and we really need to imagine it. I keep saying this and nobody agrees, but I think I'll put my idea forward. Okay, let's privatize these things. I think the biggest problem with state-owned enterprises is not that they are in private hands. The problem is that they're in the government hands and bureaucrats run them, and bureaucrats actually steal from them. And bureaucrats are not interested in running them productively. So what we want to do is make sure that these are run well for the benefit of the society. So yes, of course, if you give it to a private hand, they will not, at least they will be off the exchequer. There will be no losses that they present to the budget. So that's good. But there's another intermediate way. For example, what I would argue is put these things on the stock market. Let the stock market own them. Let not one individual own them. That broadens the market too. So let all the SOEs be put on the stock market gradually. 3, 4, 5% at a time. Let the public buy them. Let your public buy them. And at the same time, you have pension funds, you have mutual funds. Let the mutual fund and the pension fund buy them. Let them be owned by the large mutual funds and especially the pension funds. Pension funds can own them. Government is a very large pension fund in Sri Lanka. You have a large, this social security thing. Let them own the companies, but then they have to be run well, professionally, outside the ambit of the government bureaucrats who have no stake in the system. So you have to develop a system of stock options and other things that can make it work. Once again, it requires deep thought, deep research, and very deft management by the government. So you have to have good people in government who are ready to reimagine things and make them work. Once again, I go to Dubai. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. It's a miracle that's happening that we should all look at. It's a small country with nothing there, not even oil. And because they're so professional in what they do, they've been able to make a miracle. It has way more investment than even Pakistan has. Because why? Because they are working out imaginative solutions, doing things well, doing things imaginatively, creating opportunities for everybody, from the Russians to the Chinese to the Egyptians. Everybody wants to come and invest there. This is what Sri Lanka should have been. My imagined Sri Lanka from long time back was this, that you guys will be a Singapore or a Dubai, where you will create that value. But unfortunately, Sri Lanka thinks insularly, not outward looking.
Right. I'd like to turn to Dr. Jayaweera. Dr. Ul Haque talks about why Sri Lanka missed the bus of being the Dubai of South Asia, that Sri Lanka should have really become the hub in this region. We talk about Singapore, how Singapore developed from what Ceylon was then to become another Ceylon. But today we're talking about where Singapore is and why Sri Lanka should employ policies that take Sri Lanka there. Let's start off with SAARC integration. You were also in the SAARC Chamber of Commerce. You were the former vice president there, Dr. Jayaweera. What are the options and what are the opportunities here for Sri Lanka at this stage to work with other members of the SAARC and the region so that we move ahead as a region towards development and prosperity?
Okay, I'll take this question last, but I would like... I mentioned about Dr. Ul Haque mentioning, and then I said I'll talk on 2 points. One, I spoke about tourism, and Dr. Haque still stands by it. The other one is handouts. We are a country that is dependent on handouts. Stop the handouts. Then the people will realize that they got to work for it. Not be on the street shouting, but work. All the developed countries, people work. They shout less, they talk less, they work more. Farmers are the richest in the developed world. Our farmers are the poorest in this country. Why? Because they depend on handouts, and there is no responsibility between the government, the private sector, and the farmer. The private sector is all out to make a profit. Government is there to see that the private sector is controlled, not to make exorbitant profit, but make profit. So what do? Government doesn't get involved in that. The government in this country is, again I said, empty vessel making the biggest noise. They make a lot of noise. But have we implemented any of the items that all our politicians have mentioned, we talk of infrastructure. Now, in the private sector, when we talk of investment, we always do a return on investment. This country has done many investments in the last 20 years where there is no ROI. I was in Bangalore 2 weeks ago. Bangalore has made an airport or terminal which will be launched soon, which is equal or better than Singapore. Why? That is Modi idea. Be the best in the world. They will launch it within the next 3 months. I was able to go and take a glimpse of it using some influential friends. It's fantabulous. The challenge to Singapore or any other countries in the world. I come to our airport. I don't call it a dump. It's better than a dump. But then countries surrounding us have improved their airports to that extent. This country, the airport is a dump. And then we keep on talking that our airport is one of the best. No. We should gear the airport to receive at least 18 million tourists a year. Collect the revenue from the airport, put it back into development of the airport so that they are responsible. The airport authority is responsible for development. Now what happens? Money goes to the treasury. They have to put a project proposal and the treasury allocates the money with no proposal. But we have to look at the return on investment. Airports are all gold mines all over the world. And for example, take UK, United Kingdom. 5 airports are run by the private sector and they are the best in the world. When they were run by the London Transport Authority, they were dumps. But now, London, Heathrow, there are 5 airports now being run by the private sector. They are all listed companies controlled by one big airport is controlled by African billionaire. Fabulous. The improvement that they have done to the airport is beyond speech. What are we? We don't put that money back into development of that particular place. Now, Dr. Ul Haque raised another good point about we talk of privatization. We had a campaign in 1990s during President Rana Singha Premadasa's time. The current president was the Prime Minister. We peopleized a lot of companies that went into the stock market. And the stock market from around 300 points crossed 1,000 points in about 3 weeks' time. Why can't we? Now, nothing has come into the stock market for the last 24 months or 36 months.
To add to that, I'm sorry to interrupt Dr. Jayaweera. I'm being told that we have very limited time on the program. So to add to that, my last question to you is also on the transition to a social market economy that the President was talking about. While doing this, is this realizable? Is this something that we can realize within the context of the policies and the framework that the Sri Lankan economy operates going forward? We have a few minutes before I turn to Dr. Ul Haque.
Okay, based on the social market economy, we should have a free market economy where the government is in competition with the private sector. We talk of mismanaged state corporations. IOS undertook a state corporation that was mismanaged, made it profitable in 18 months. So it's the right type of management using the same people. The correct guidance is required. They should be responsible. They should now see most of the ministries don't publish their accounts. They just take the money and spend on something. And then what have they spent it on? 40% is lost somewhere. 60% has gone into the project. So where has this 40% gone? Into automobiles, into travel, into various things like that, where we have to have controls, good FR, AR. That's what the British taught us. Financial and administrative regulations, those are gone. They are scrapped by the current public officials. They don't know and they are not educated. Though they have a degree, I mean, This country was run by people, public officials during that time who didn't have a science degree. They all had arts degrees, but they knew how to manage their government departments. But now, we take people with qualifications, with degrees from various countries, but they don't know their FR and AR. That's what I have to say.
Right. Turning to Dr. Nadeem Ul Haque, I think the final few minutes on the show, we spoke about how I spoke to you earlier about other countries, including Greece and Argentina, that have had rocky relationships with the International Monetary Fund. At the same time, how some other countries have been on IMF programs, including neighboring India, the South Asian superpower, and sustains an economy catering to a larger population. But here, going forward, we just spoke about a transition to a social market economy, or whether it's just restructuring state-owned enterprises as an element to the International Monetary Fund bailout package deal with Sri Lanka. How do we, moving forward, look at creating setting up non-debt creating ventures as a long-term sustainable solution to the country? And I'd also like to, if you can address the SAARC integration question.
I'll take the SAARC integration first. Look, SAARC integration is a pipe dream. It's not going to happen. India and Pakistan just not coming together. So long as Modi is there, it's not even probably likely because of what's happening in India. I know you don't want me to go there, and I won't. So SAARC integration is a long, long way off. It will happen one day, but it'll happen, I don't know how. But on the other issue, look, the point is we gained independence. We wanted independence, we gained independence. Independence comes with some responsibility, which unfortunately we haven't really shouldered. And we should accept that unfortunately our countries, especially my country, has been very badly run. We are still having a political battle on who wants to be king. So I think that's very sad that we have not even figured out a system of governance that we can be happy with. At the same time, you know, when you talk about the IMF, as I said, the IMF is a doctor, a country doctor. You don't rely on your health to a doctor. You go to a doctor when you're sick, but you want to avoid going to a doctor. So you live well, you eat well, you exercise, you do all the things you need to do because you want to stay healthy. Unfortunately, in my country, we do everything to get sick. And then when we get sick, we think that the world owes us something, the world will forgive our debt, or the world will come to our rescue. I think this is not an attitude for independent people. If you're independent, we must shoulder our responsibility. It's our job to make our country work. And this business of subsidies, I think this business of handouts, as Mr. Jayaweera said, is absolutely correct. For God's sakes, this handout economy has to go. Handouts were a part of the feudal system, and we are adopting a feudal system. We have to get to the modern capitalist system. I don't like social marketing in terms like that. My prime minister, former prime minister Imran Khan used to say, Rasat Medina too. I don't like that. I think, quite frankly, let's accept the fact that modernity requires an open economy, open competitive economy, an imaginative economy, and idea-led economy, and we have to move there. Now, yes, of course, nobody's saying that we should be harsh and not sensitive to the needs of the disadvantaged. Of course, we should be sensitive to them. But let's not confuse that with the fact that the country as a whole has to compete and has to wake up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ul Haque, and thank you very much, Dr. Jayaweera. We were talking about the International Monetary Fund and how Sri Lanka's bailout package and policies that Sri Lankan authorities should have in the country in order to come out of this crisis with a sustainable growth path. I must thank Dr. Nadeem Ul Haque, who has joined us virtually from Pakistan. He was the former resident representative of the International International Monetary Fund in Sri Lanka, and is currently the Vice Chancellor of the Pakistan Institute of Development Economics, and also served as the Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission of Pakistan. Thank you very much once again, Dr. Ul Haque, a renowned economist. I hope you'll visit Sri Lanka, revisit Sri Lanka, so we can have this conversation in studio.
Looking forward to it. Inshallah, I'll be there sometime this year.
Looking forward to it.
That's a promise I've made. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow you.
I said that's a promise I've made myself. So inshallah, I'll be there this year.
We are looking forward to that. And Dr. Tissa Jayaweera, thank you very much for joining us once again here at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24. You've held multiple positions as Chairman and MD in Corporates, a member of the Federation of Chambers of Commerce and Industry of Sri Lanka, the former Vice President of the SARC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and other international chambers as well. So thank you very much for your time here at Hyde Park.
Thank you very much. And Ayu Boho One.
Thank you very much. We will see you again next week with yet another episode at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.